Let's dive right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Imagine a ruthless mafia, but without the guns. No broken glass, no getaway cars. Just a phantom enemy executing one of the most sophisticated, invisible cyber heists in human history. Today, we're unpacking the terrifyingly real story of FIN7. This wasn't some group of amateur hackers goofing around in a basement. No, this was a highly structured, deadly efficient criminal syndicate operating out of the quiet streets of Eastern Europe. And trust me, what they pulled off is going to sound like a script straight out of a Hollywood thriller, but every single detail is absolutely 100% real. To really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of what we're dealing with here, just look at this number, 15 million. That is how many credit and debit cards the syndicate managed to steal. 15 million. And the financial fallout? We are talking upwards of $1 billion in damages, with some estimates even pushing that to between 3 and 5 billion globally. They did it all by secretly slipping into the payment systems of thousands of businesses. They were draining cash from ATMs and clearing out bank accounts, all while the entire world was blissfully unaware. It's crazy when you think about the evolution of crime, right? I mean, traditional bank robberies, they were loud. You had ski masks, physical vaults, blaring alarms. But the FIN7 heist, it was utterly silent. We're talking invisible code and fake IT companies replacing the getaway drivers. They proved that the most dangerous robberies of the 21st century aren't committed by people hiding their faces behind masks. They're committed by fingers clicking away on keyboards thousands of miles away, leaving literally zero physical trace. Section 1. The Invisible Empire. Because honestly, the most chilling part of this whole story isn't just the sheer amount of money they stole, it's who they stole it from. They didn't just go after faceless megabanks. They targeted us, our daily routines. You probably recognize almost every single name here on this list. Starting around 2015, FIN7 zeroed in heavily on the retail, restaurant, and hospitality industries. Why? Because that is exactly where millions of everyday people swipe their cards every single day. We're talking about massive chains like Chipotle, Chili's, and Arby's, luxury spots like Saks Fifth Avenue and Lord & Taylor, even Trump hotels. Just picture it. You're sitting down for a nice meal, or you're treating yourself to a new jacket. You swipe your card at the register. It's an entirely normal, everyday action. But you have absolutely no idea that the exact moment that card swipes, your data is being beamed straight to a hacker's server. Which obviously begs a massive question. How? Seriously, how did a gang of cybercriminals operate a billion-dollar empire, infiltrating thousands of locations all over the world, right under the noses of the FBI for years? Well, the answer lies in a brilliantly deceptive cover story. This brings us to Section 2, the fake security company. To hide in plain sight, FIN7 didn't just lurk in the dark corners of the internet. They built a corporate facade so incredibly convincing, it literally fooled their own employees. They spun up a completely fake company called Combi Security. It had a slick, professional website listing clients, which, shockingly enough, were actually the companies they were actively hacking. They hired over 70 totally legitimate IT professionals. They had an HR department, recruiters, managers, developers, the whole shebang. They worked standard 9 to 5 hours. They took weekends off. When they hired these bright IT experts, they told them they were doing penetration testing to find security flaws for their corporate clients. These completely innocent employees signed strict non-disclosure agreements, totally unaware that the brilliant code they were writing was actually being weaponized to rob millions of people. It was a digital mafia disguised as a totally normal tech startup. Crazy, right? Let's move to Section 3, the 4 levels of theft. FIN7 was incredibly methodical. They broke their massive operation down into 4 highly complex, distinct phases. This right here is the blueprint for a perfect digital crime. Step 1 was getting their foot in the door through spear phishing. Step 2 was the actual point of sale takeover. Step 3 was data exfiltration, basically sneaking the stolen goods out the back door. And finally, Step 4, cash conversion, turning that stolen data into clean, spendable money. Let's break these down because the psychology they used here is just fascinating. So Step 1 was spear phishing. And let me tell you, these guys were absolute masters of social engineering. They weren't just blasting out mass spam emails. Oh no. They would research a specific company on LinkedIn, find the exact manager in charge of group bookings or finance, and carefully craft a highly realistic email. If it was a restaurant, they might send a request for a massive catering order for over 100 guests. Attached to the email would be a totally normal-looking Word document or PDF with the order details. But here is the most chilling part, the psychological manipulation. Literally moments after sending the email, a FIN7 member would pick up the phone and call the restaurant. They'd say, "Hey, I just sent over a massive catering order. Can you open the file and confirm you got it?" The employee, obviously eager for a huge sale, opens the file. Boom, the custom-designed malware silently installs itself. Think about that for a second. If you were in their shoes, you probably would have opened it too, right? Once they were inside the network, they moved to step 2, the POS takeover. They'd creep through the company's network until they reached the point of sale systems, the actual cash registers sitting in the stores. Here, they deployed something called fileless malware. This is an absolute nightmare for cybersecurity folks because it never actually saves to the hard drive. It just hides out completely in the computer's memory, making it practically invisible to your standard antivirus software. The exact second a customer swiped their card, the malware instantly captured the card number, the expiration date, and the chip data in what's known as a card dump. And to the cashier and the customer standing there, the transaction looked perfectly normal. No red flags whatsoever. Then we get to steps 3 and 4. That stolen data was silently exfiltrated or smuggled out to remote servers back in Eastern Europe. From there, FIN7 basically acted like wholesale distributors. They sold millions of these stolen cards on massive dark web marketplaces, specifically a notorious forum called Joker's Stash, selling them for premium prices. But wait, it gets wilder. They didn't even stop there. They actually cloned the cards for ATM jackpotting, physically draining cash machines. They used stolen cards to buy huge amounts of gift cards and electronics, reselling them to launder the money. They even set up entirely fake merchant companies to run fake transactions, washing their dirty millions into clean, untraceable cash. It was a perfectly oiled, end-to-end criminal machine. All right, Section 4, a highly organized syndicate. Look, you just do not pull something of this scale off without some incredibly brilliant and ruthless leadership. This wasn't just some loose collective of hackers on the internet. It was a strict hierarchy led by a core group of masterminds. You had Fedor Ledier, a Ukrainian citizen who acted as the systems administrator and technical guru, basically managing all their illicit servers. Dmytro Fedorov was a high-level manager and the lead hacker. Andrei Kobakov was the supervisor handling the recruitment and training of all the new blood. And Denis Yermak was the boots-on-the-ground penetration tester, which, as we know, was just their corporate code word for hacker. Operating with this Fortune 500-style structure, reports indicate FIN7 was pulling in over $50 million a month. $50 million! They sat on an estimated reserve of over $1 billion. Whenever security firms managed to block their tools, FIN7 simply threw their massive pile of cash at the problem and invented brand new malware within 24 hours. Which really builds the suspense, doesn't it? They were insanely rich, practically invisible, and constantly mutating their tactics. So the big question was, would international law enforcement ever be able to catch up to an enemy they couldn't even see? The FBI quickly realized they weren't just fighting a few rogue hackers. They were going up against a full-blown digital cartel. That leads us into Section 5, the takedown and arrests. The FBI's Seattle field office stepped up and established a dedicated cyber task force. They teamed up with the Secret Service, Interpol, and some of the biggest private cybersecurity firms in the world to finally start mapping out FIN7's massive infrastructure. And finally, in 2018, the net started to close. Now, because Russia generally protects its citizens from extradition, the authorities had to play the waiting game until these targets traveled abroad. But the trap worked. In January 2018, German police swooped in and grabbed Fedor Halagier in Dresden. By mid-year, Dmytro Fedorova was captured in Poland. And in June, Andrei Kolpakov was arrested down in Spain. All of them were extradited straight to the U.S. to face heavy federal charges. Later on, Denis Yermak was caught too. They all got hit with massive prison sentences, ranging from 5 to 10 years, plus millions of dollars in restitution fines. The authorities held massive press conferences, claiming a huge victory. They genuinely believed they had cut the head off the snake. But you guys, here is the massive twist in our story. If the authorities thought FIN7 was dead and buried, they were dead wrong. Those high-profile arrests, they barely even slowed the syndicate down. The group simply mutated. The very second Combi Security was exposed in the news, they just spun up a brand new fake company called Bastian Secure. They immediately hired fresh developers, changed up their malware signatures, and completely adapted their methods without skipping a single beat. Which brings us to our final chapter. Section 6, the enduring cyber threat. FIN7 eventually realized that stealing credit cards from restaurant registers was just getting too hot. Law enforcement was catching on to the retail game. So they evolved. And what they evolved into is so much worse.
Their evolution is honestly terrifying. They pivoted away from retail theft and dove headfirst into ransomware as a service, teaming up with notorious gangs like Revol and Black Hat. Do you remember that massive Colonial Pipeline hack back in 2021 that caused literal gas shortages all across America? Yeah, well, security experts later discovered that the underlying code used in that attack was actually supplied by FIN7. In 2022, they got even bolder. They actually physically mailed infected USB drives to U.S. defense firms, disguising them as official FBI packages. If an employee plugged it in, boom, ransomware installed instantly. And just recently, in 2024, security firms tracked over 4,000 brand new fake domains set up by FIN7, mimicking famous brands to launch entirely new phishing campaigns. They're heavily backed, likely sheltered within Russia, and operating right now as an untouchable global cartel.
But all of this devastation did leave a permanent mark on how we protect ourselves today. FIN7 basically forced the entire global cybersecurity industry to grow up overnight. Their legacy is massive. They single-handedly accelerated the global push for those EMV chip cards we all use now, simply because chips are way harder to clone than those old magnetic stripes. They triggered an absolute boom in cyber insurance. Companies finally woke up and realized cybersecurity is a fundamental business risk, not just an IT problem. They forced incredibly strict compliance rules like end-to-end encryption, and they forced law enforcement to adapt, leading to the creation of dedicated FBI cyber task forces in every single field office.
But the war is far from over. As FBI agent J. Tabb stated during that 2018 press conference, cybercriminals who think they're safe in other countries are mistaken. They will be found and brought to justice. It is a relentless, exhausting game of cat and mouse between incredibly well-funded criminal syndicates and global intelligence agencies.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The original leaders might be sitting in a federal prison, but the syndicate itself lives on. FIN7 is still out there. Right now, as we speak, they are adapting, they are hiding behind new fake companies, and they are constantly hunting for new vulnerabilities. They've proven that the ultimate threat isn't a guy in a ski mask anymore. It's an invisible line of code. So I leave you with this. The next time you sit down at a restaurant, finish a great meal, and hand over your card to swipe at the register, are you absolutely sure that point-of-sale system is safe? Think about how shockingly easy it is to become a victim of a completely silent crime. What would you do if you realized your data was compromised? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay safe out there.